He was my friend, and we got along great. We did a lot of laughter.
At 84 years old, Ann-Margret is finally opening up about one of the most talked about chapters of her life, her relationship with Elvis Presley. For decades, the truth behind their connection has been surrounded by rumors, headlines, and whispers from those who claim to know the real story. Now, she's sharing what really happened, in her own words. Join us as we uncover the untold details of their time together, from their first meeting to the final goodbye, and everything in between. Before the sparks. Ann-Margret was born on April 28, 1941, in the small village of Valsjöben in Jämtland County, Sweden. Her parents, Carl Gustaf and Anna Aronson Olsson, were hardworking people who wanted a better future for their family. In 1946, when Ann-Margret was just 5 years old, they left Sweden and moved to the United States. They settled in the Chicago area where her father found work and her mother focused on creating a stable home for their only child. From a young age, Ann-Margret showed a love for music and movement. Her parents supported her interests, enrolling her in dance lessons at the Marjorie Young School of Dance. She quickly became skilled and developed a stage presence that would serve her well in the years to come. By her teenage years, she was performing at local events and gaining attention for her talent and charisma. Ann-Margret's big break came after she attended Northwestern University, where she studied drama. While performing with a group called the Subtle Tones, she was discovered by Hollywood talent scouts. In 1961, she signed a 7-year contract with 20th Century Fox, after a screen test impressed the studio executives. That same year, she made her film debut in Pocketful of Miracles. Her rise to stardom was quick. In 1963, she gained national attention for her role in Bye Bye Birdie, which showcased her acting, singing, and dancing skills. The performance earned her a Golden Globe nomination and opened the door to more leading roles. Just a year later, she starred opposite Elvis Presley in Viva Las Vegas, a role that made her one of Hollywood's most exciting leading ladies. Over her 70-year career, Ann-Margret has proven her versatility. She has acted in dramas, comedies, and musicals, and has recorded several albums as a singer. Her talent has been recognized with numerous awards, including 5 Golden Globes and an Emmy Award. She has also received nominations for 2 Academy Awards and 2 Grammy Awards. Ann-Margret built a career marked by dedication, energy, and the ability to connect with audiences across generations. Elvis Aaron Presley was born on January 8, 1935, in Tupelo, Mississippi. His parents, Vernon and Gladys Presley, struggled financially but were deeply devoted to their son. Elvis was their only surviving child, as his twin brother, Jesse Garon Presley, was stillborn. The family lived in modest homes, often moving to find better opportunities. Elvis grew up surrounded by the sounds of gospel music in church, as well as country and blues from local radio stations. He was drawn to music from an early age and received his first guitar at the age of 11. Though he never learned to read music formally, he taught himself to play by ear and developed a unique style. In 1948, when Elvis was 13, his family moved to Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis was a cultural crossroads, and the city's rich mix of musical influences helped shape his future sound. After graduating from high school in 1953, Elvis walked into Sun Records to record a song as a gift for his mother. The studio owner, Sam Phillips, recognized his talent and began working with him. In 1954, Elvis recorded That's All Right, a song that combined country and rhythm and blues styles. It became a local hit and set the stage for his rise to national fame. By 1956, Elvis was a sensation. His single Heartbreak Hotel reached #1, and he became a household name thanks to his energetic performances and unique voice. That same year, he made his first appearance on national television and starred in his debut film, Love Me Tender. Over the next 2 decades, Elvis became one of the most successful entertainers in history. He sold hundreds of millions of records, starred in over 30 films, and won 3 Grammy Awards. His musical range spanned rock and roll, gospel, country, and rhythm and blues. In 1968, he staged a major career comeback with his televised '68 comeback special, leading to years of sold-out concerts and record-breaking tours. Sadly, his health began to decline in the 1970s due to prescription drug dependence and poor eating habits. Despite these struggles, Elvis remained a beloved figure until his death on August 16, 1977, at the age of 42. His music continues to inspire fans around the world. These two stars came from very different beginnings, but both were shaped by determination, raw talent, and an unshakable love for performing. And when they met, sparks were bound to fly. The start of an affair. In July 1963, the worlds of Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret crossed for the first time at the MGM soundstage at Radio Recorder Studios in Hollywood, California. Both were there to begin work on Viva Las Vegas, a film that would soon become one of the most memorable in either of their careers. Director George Sidney, who was guiding the production, was the one who brought them together. It was a moment that neither of them could have predicted would change the course of their lives. When George Sidney introduced them, the meeting was simple but meaningful. They shook hands, and within minutes, a shared sense of humor began to draw them in. Both were quick-witted and enjoyed teasing in a playful way. This easy back and forth made them comfortable with each other almost instantly. For Ann-Margret, meeting Elvis was not an overwhelming or intimidating moment, even though he was already one of the most famous men in America. Known as the King, Elvis had millions of fans and an image that made him seem larger than life. But Ann-Margret stayed calm. She saw him not as the legend the world adored, but as a fellow performer, and that allowed her to connect with him naturally from the start. Their first meeting was short. A few staged publicity photos were taken of them together, capturing what looked like easy chemistry. But after that, they went their separate ways. It wasn't until July 11, 1963, that they met again. This time, the setting was the Radio Recorder Studio in Los Angeles. They were there to record several duets for the movie's soundtrack. From the moment they began working, it was clear something special was happening. Their voices blended effortlessly, and they seemed to understand each other's rhythm without having to discuss it. That day marked the beginning of a partnership that was both professional and personal. During rehearsals, their connection became even more obvious. Whether singing or dancing, they moved in sync, as if they were a mirror image of one another. When Elvis took a step, Ann-Margret instinctively matched it. If he dropped a shoulder or spun around, she mirrored the movement with perfect timing. What began as a professional connection between Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret soon started to deepen. As the Viva Las Vegas project moved forward, they spent more time together outside of rehearsals and filming. They found themselves drawn into long, late-night conversations, often lasting for hours. These talks were not about work or Hollywood gossip. They were about personal things. They spoke openly about their hopes for the future, the dreams they carried, and the disappointments and hurts they had experienced in life. They also shared their fears, the kind of thoughts that are rarely spoken aloud. It was during these quiet moments that they began to see each other in a different way. Each felt understood in a way that didn't happen often in their high-profile lives. Elvis, who was known for guarding his private feelings, began to let his guard down. Ann-Margret, in turn, felt comfortable sharing her own experiences without worrying about judgment. When they were not talking, they would go for drives together. Elvis enjoyed getting away from the busy Las Vegas scene, and Ann-Margret went along for the escape. They would take his car out into the surrounding hills, finding quiet, secluded spots where they could look down at the bright city lights, or simply watch the stars above them. These moments allowed them to step away from the public eye and just be themselves. On July 15th, filming for Viva Las Vegas officially began in Nevada. The production was centered at the Sahara Hotel, one of the most famous resorts on the Strip at the time. Elvis stayed in the hotel's presidential suite on the 28th floor. Ann-Margret had a room a few floors below. While the arrangement was for practical reasons related to the production, the proximity made it easier for them to see each other outside of filming hours. The workdays were busy, filled with rehearsals, filming, and promotional commitments, but their connection continued to grow in between takes. Both Elvis and Ann-Margret were known for giving their all to their performances, and working so closely together only strengthened their understanding of each other's dedication. It wasn't long before Elvis asked Ann-Margret to join him for an evening out. This wasn't a typical romantic dinner. Instead, it was a group outing to a Las Vegas show, with several of Elvis's friends coming along. Ann-Margret didn't mind the group setting. She noticed right away that his friends were polite and welcoming. They treated her with warmth and respect, making it easy for her to feel at ease. For Elvis's friends, her presence was equally comfortable. She didn't try to take over conversations or seek attention, and this helped her fit naturally into the group. Elvis himself seemed more relaxed with her there, laughing more freely and showing a lighter side of himself. After that first outing, they began to spend more time alone. At first, it was casual, sharing a meal after work, or meeting for a quiet conversation. But it soon became more personal. Elvis began opening up about parts of his life that he rarely spoke about. He talked about the pressures he felt from his fame, the responsibility he carried toward his family, and the struggles he faced with balancing his personal and professional life. Ann-Margret listened without judgment and understood more than most would. She was experiencing her own rise in Hollywood and knew the challenges that came with public attention. The more time they spent together, the more it became clear that this was no ordinary co-star friendship. Their closeness was starting to turn into something undeniable, and soon, everyone around them would begin to notice. Stealing scenes and hearts. From the moment the cameras started rolling on Viva Las Vegas, it was clear that Ann-Margret brought a level of energy and charisma that stood out. She was confident, playful, and skilled, with a natural ability to light up every scene she was in. Her singing and dancing were not just technically good, they were filled with personality, which made her performances hard to look away from. For Elvis, this was a rare match. He had worked with many leading ladies before, but few could keep up with his stage presence. Ann-Margret was different. She didn't fade into the background. She met his energy head-on, and their chemistry was obvious to anyone watching. On set, she often pushed him to perform at his best, and he responded in kind. Later in life, Ann-Margret would say that Elvis was her best on-screen partner, and during filming, he seemed to feel the same way about her. Their scenes together were electric, from the dance sequences to the playful banter. Viewers would later see this chemistry on screen, but the people working behind the scenes were witnessing it unfold in real life every day. As the filming went on, some tension began to build, but not between Elvis and Ann-Margret. Instead, the issue came from behind the camera. Director George Sidney was accused by members of Elvis's inner circle of giving Ann-Margret too much special attention. They believed he was positioning the camera in ways that favored her, sometimes at Elvis's expense. Elvis's friends, including Red West, Lamar Fike, Joe Esposito, and Sonny West, noticed this and brought it to his attention. Elvis himself began to feel that the shots were being arranged to make Ann-Margret stand out more than him. This was especially sensitive because the movie was officially billed as an Elvis Presley picture, and he was protective of his role as the main star. The concern eventually reached Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's longtime manager. Parker confronted the producers, reminding them that the film was supposed to be centered on Elvis. He was not convinced by MGM's explanation that Ann-Margret's prominence would attract a wider audience. Parker's influence was strong, and he made sure adjustments were made. One major change came in the music department. Originally, the film featured 3 duets between Elvis and Ann-Margret. In the final cut, this was reduced to just one, giving Elvis 6 solo numbers and Ann-Margret only 2. While her dance skills were still showcased, the finished version made it clear that Elvis was the leading focus. This behind-the-scenes dispute could have easily created tension between the two stars, but it didn't. Whatever professional frustrations Elvis may have felt about the camera angles or the reduced duets, they did not carry over into his personal relationship with Ann-Margret. By that stage of filming, the two were already deeply involved in what those close to them described as a full-blown love affair. When they were off camera, they laughed, talked, and spent time together without letting the professional disagreements come between them. Elvis seemed to understand that the controversy was more about the way the movie was being produced than about Ann-Margret herself. She, for her part, remained supportive of him and didn't let the changes in the film's structure affect how she interacted with him. Their ability to keep their personal bond separate from the on-set politics only strengthened their connection. By the time Viva Las Vegas wrapped filming, their relationship was far more than just co-stars, enjoying a friendly rapport. It was intense, real, and something that couldn't be hidden for long. And soon, the rest of the world, including Priscilla, would start to see the signs. The Hollywood love triangle. While Elvis Presley was in Nevada filming Viva Las Vegas, Priscilla Beaulieu, his girlfriend and future wife, was back in Memphis at Graceland. At that time, Priscilla was still very young and living under Elvis's roof. She had already been with him for several years, having moved from Germany to be closer to him. As the filming went on, Priscilla began to feel uneasy. She was aware of Elvis's history with his female co-stars, and reports from Hollywood only fueled her worries. The chemistry between Elvis and Ann-Margret was already being talked about among the people working on the movie, and word of this atmosphere eventually reached Priscilla. Elvis tried to calm her fears during their phone calls. He assured her that nothing was going on and that she had nothing to worry about. But despite his efforts, the physical distance and the secrecy surrounding film productions left her feeling increasingly suspicious. The situation became much more public after the movie was completed. In early 1964, Ann-Margret traveled to England for the premiere of Viva Las Vegas. During a press interview, a reporter asked about her relationship with Elvis. Ann-Margret did not deny that there was something between them. Instead, she made comments that the media quickly interpreted as a confirmation of their romance. The British press immediately ran headlines suggesting that Ann-Margret and Elvis were not only involved, but possibly heading toward an engagement. The coverage traveled fast, reaching the United States and making its way to Memphis. For Priscilla, seeing these headlines was devastating. When Priscilla confronted Elvis about the news stories, the conversation quickly turned into a heated argument. According to accounts from people close to Elvis, this was unlike their usual disagreements. Voices were raised, accusations were thrown, and emotions ran high. At one point, Elvis reportedly threatened to send Priscilla back to Germany, which only escalated the tension between them. Priscilla did not keep her feelings private. She spoke with her parents about the situation, and they were furious. From their perspective, Elvis had made a commitment to their daughter, and his behavior was unacceptable. They began pressing for answers and wanted to know if he intended to marry her or not. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, became involved as well. The colonel was very protective of Elvis's public image and wanted to avoid a scandal that could damage his career. He also understood the importance of Elvis keeping his promise to Priscilla and her family. With the media already spinning the story of an Elvis-Ann-Margret romance, Parker pushed Elvis to end the relationship with Ann-Margret once and for all. For Elvis, the pressure was coming from all sides, from Priscilla, from her parents, and from his own manager. At the same time, he still had strong feelings for Ann-Margret. The Memphis Mafia, his close group of friends and associates, later shared their belief that Elvis might have chosen Ann-Margret if she had been willing to give up her career to be with him. But this was a choice Ann-Margret could not make. She was at the height of her career, with film offers, music opportunities, and a growing public following. Stepping away from that would have meant giving up the independence and success she had worked for since her teenage years. Elvis also faced his own personal obligations. He had promised Priscilla and her family a future, and breaking that promise could have damaged more than just his personal life. It could have hurt his carefully managed public image. In the end, neither Elvis nor Ann-Margret was willing to give up what they had worked for, and the relationship faced an unavoidable turning point. Even though the love triangle caused tension, heartbreak, and public speculation, it did not erase the deep feelings Elvis and Ann-Margret had for each other. But the decision about what would happen next could no longer be delayed. And when that decision came, it changed the course of all their lives. The end of the affair. By late 1964, the relationship between Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret had reached its breaking point. What had started as an exciting and intense romance was now weighed down by outside pressures, personal obligations, and the public attention surrounding them. After the incident with the British press and the arguments with Priscilla, Elvis began to pull away. His phone calls to Ann-Margret became less frequent, and soon they stopped altogether. She tried to reach him, but he didn't answer. Hoping it was just a temporary silence, she sent him a telegram. That, too, went unanswered. Ann-Margret still wanted to understand what was happening, so she reached out to some of Elvis's closest friends, members of the Memphis Mafia. They were usually open with her, but this time she received vague or evasive answers. Nobody gave her a clear explanation, and it became obvious that Elvis had decided to end the relationship without telling her directly. Although she was hurt by the sudden distance, Ann-Margret was not entirely surprised. She knew there were other forces in Elvis's life that made their relationship difficult. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had strong opinions about how Elvis should live his personal and professional life. His relationship with Priscilla was already a long-standing commitment, one that involved promises to her family. And, of course, Elvis's career was carefully managed to avoid scandals that could harm his public image. Ann-Margret also understood that Elvis was dealing with his own emotional and personal struggles. She had seen sides of him that most people didn't: the pressures of fame, the desire for privacy, and the challenges of balancing a career with a personal life. Even though she was disappointed by how abruptly things ended, she recognized that it wasn't just about her. It was a complicated situation that neither of them could easily fix. Their romance had lasted for nearly a year, from the summer of 1963, when they met on the set of Viva Las Vegas, until late 1964. During that time, they had shared countless private moments, supported each other's careers, and built a connection that went deeper than simple attraction. But by the end of 1964, it was clear that Elvis was choosing to remain with Priscilla. Over the next couple of years, he continued his relationship with her, leading to their wedding on May 1, 1967, in Las Vegas. Ann-Margret, too, moved forward with her life. Just 1 week after Elvis's wedding, she married actor Roger Smith, also in Las Vegas. Roger would later become her manager, and their marriage lasted 50 years until his death in 2017. While their romantic relationship had ended, the affection and respect between Elvis and Ann-Margret never fully disappeared. In the years that followed, they would see each other again under different circumstances, but the chapter of their lives that was defined by romance had officially closed. What came next for them wasn't love in the same way, but it was something that lasted until the end of Elvis's life. Back in his life. Although their romance ended in 1964, Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret did not drift apart completely. In the years that followed, they reconnected on friendly terms. Their paths often crossed in Las Vegas, where both performed regularly. These reunions were warm rather than awkward, marked by genuine smiles and mutual respect. One of the most touching gestures from Elvis came whenever Ann-Margret opened a new show in Las Vegas. Without fail, he sent a large floral arrangement in the shape of a guitar. It became a tradition that lasted for more than a decade. continuing until his death in 1977. To Ann-Margret, these flowers were more than just a show of support. They were a reminder that he still cared and valued her as a friend. By 1969, both Elvis and Ann-Margret were experiencing major moments in their careers. That year, Elvis returned to live performances after years focused on movies, opening his famous Las Vegas residency at the International Hotel. Ann-Margret was also performing in Las Vegas, drawing big crowds with her singing, dancing, and stage presence. They would sometimes attend each other's shows, watching from the audience and cheering the other on. When they visited backstage, it was not for publicity. It was personal. They would talk privately, catch up on each other's lives, and offer encouragement. For Elvis, Ann-Margret was someone who understood the demands of performing night after night. For Ann-Margret, Elvis was a familiar and trusted figure in an industry full of changing faces. This friendly connection carried into the 1970s. Even as their schedules kept them busy and their personal lives took different paths, they maintained this occasional contact. It wasn't constant, but when they did see each other, the old ease between them returned instantly. Behind the scenes, both were facing challenges that fame could not protect them from. For Elvis, the pressures of constant touring, performing, and public expectation began to take a toll on his health. In the 1970s, his dependence on prescription drugs worsened. Those close to him noticed the changes in his mood, energy, and physical well-being. Ann-Margret, meanwhile, was fighting her own battle with alcohol. She kept much of this struggle private, but it was something she worked hard to overcome. Eventually, she did, regaining control of her life and career. The final goodbye. By 1977, Elvis Presley's health had declined noticeably. Years of grueling tours, intense pressure, and dependence on prescription medications had taken their toll. His once strong physique was heavier, his energy was inconsistent, and close friends worried about his well-being. Ann-Margret, though no longer in frequent contact with him, still cared deeply. She made quiet inquiries about how he was doing, asking mutual friends for updates. She wanted to be sure he was all right, but the news she heard was troubling. Those around Elvis spoke of his exhaustion and the strain he was under. On August 16, 1977, the world learned that Elvis Presley had died at Graceland. The shock was immediate, and for Ann-Margret, it was personal. She was told by some people to stay away from the funeral, likely because of her history with him and the sensitivity of the moment. But Ann-Margret didn't listen. She knew she had to be there to say goodbye. When she arrived in Memphis for the funeral, she did so quietly without making a public display. She wasn't there for the cameras, she was there for Elvis and his family. During the gathering, Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, took a moment to speak to her privately. He told her words she would never forget. "Elvis truly loved you." For Ann-Margret, this was both comforting and heartbreaking, a reminder of the deep connection they had shared years earlier. In the months after Elvis's passing, tributes to him appeared across the world. 3 months later, in November 1977, Ann-Margret hosted the NBC television special Memories of Elvis. The program was a mix of music, interviews, and film clips that celebrated his life and legacy. For Ann-Margret, hosting the special was more than just a professional job. It was a personal way to honor him. She spoke warmly about Elvis, focusing on the joy he brought to audiences and the charisma he carried on stage. The special allowed fans to remember Elvis not only as a legendary performer, but also as a man who had touched the lives of those who knew him personally. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss more true Hollywood stories.